Hello, and welcome to Voices from the Field, a Mayford podcast where we talk with educators in the field to hear about their perspectives and experiences. My name is Jake Burson, Advocacy Chair for Mayford, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Brad Hunter. Brad is the 2025 Shape America National Adapted PE Teacher of the Year. Brad is an itinerant adapted PE teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools, responsible for services across 20 different schools. Brad is the president of the Maryland Adapted PE Consortium, also known as MAPEC, and serves on the board of Shape Maryland and is the co-chair of the Maryland State Department of Education PE Standards and Framework Committee. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Awesome to be here, Jake. I'm glad you were able to fit that all in. The resume gets long after you approach your second decade. I know. So,
No, I hear you, Brad. It's great to connect with you, and thank you so much for saying yes to the podcast. Before we get started, what's making you smile these days?
so I'm on the cusp of students coming back. We have one more teacher day, and then students will be back on Monday. I think the number one thing that's making me smile is I've already gotten a half dozen inquiries from families of students I've worked with in the past to double check that I'm still going to be working with their student in the coming year. And that just clearly solidifies why it's important and valuable to create those home connections, and that the family really does value it, because one of the things they're thinking of in their back to school list of things to do is, let me just make sure that Coach Hunter is still working with my student.
Wow, how affirming. That's awesome to hear. That's really great. So, Brad, tell us more about who you are and how you started your education journey.
Sure. So this will now be my 19th year working with students. I'm not a traditionally trained teacher in the PE field, never have taken a health PE or AP undergrad class. I'm a career changer. I first started working with youth on like a consistent, Monday through Friday basis, with a nonprofit whose work was to bring productive and meaningful play back to urban schools that had done things like eliminating recess from the school day, which we could go down that rabbit hole, but that
That's,
was such a disaster.
I'm sure.
Um, and schools have by and large brought recess back in the areas that I worked in. But so then after doing that for a handful of years, I taught elementary PE for 9 years. And here I am starting my 7th year as an adapted PE teacher. So that's the cliff notes on Brad Hunter's journey.
So, what inspired you to pursue a career in the APE field? You had this
So,
switch.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring that up, because so often in life, I think of like our parents' generation who are always talking about, climbing the ladder in your career.
Mhm.
And I read an article one time that really stuck with me that our generation and the generation after us, it's much more of a jungle gym. Sometimes you're moving parallel, and then you're moving, a little bit up and then a little bit down. And then you have to run to the other side of the playground to get on a different piece of equipment. I just kind of think of more like a jungle gym. And
Mm.
that's kind of how I ended up in APE, because I was teaching a self-contained class, mostly of students with significant to severe autism at the elementary school that I was working at full time. An adapted PE teacher would come in periodically to support a couple of students in that class. And it was just one of those like natural, organic progressions that he saw me teach. He saw, the resources I was using and how I was catering the lesson to the students. And when an adapted PE position came available, he recommended me to the team that was doing the interviews. And it went from there. Now, let me back up a step, though, Jake. There was 9 years between beginning to teach a self-contained, mostly autistic class and getting my first APE job. So there was a lot of failure along the way. That's primarily how I learned. I didn't have a lot of resources or experts that I could, tag in for
Mhm.
support. But my biggest thing was always, with those students, and I would say with all my students, routines, working those systems and structures, because those are the things that provide that bedrock for the lesson. And then you can do more creative or engaging activities if those systems and structures and routines are really strong.
I agree. Let's talk a bit about, because you mentioned a couple times the routines and structures. What's one or two structures that you have set in place that's, really important, non-negotiable, that you've really seen benefited your students?
Sure. So I'll speak specifically when I worked with a whole class of self-contained students. It's a little different in my current role because I'm either in a support role or more of a one-on-one.
Hmm.
But when I had like a half a gym to myself, one of the routines, for example, was we had a large fleece blanket. It was red, and I would always lay it out on the floor. And the students, after about a month, realized like that was your home base, and they could sit on any part of it as long because if they were laying on it, that was passable. We would encourage them to sit up, but it was a visual cue. It was made for a comfortable space where they could go. For example, we always started with the same greeting song. It was like a 2-year-old music class I'd taken my daughter to years ago. And it was just simple of, hello, how do you do? It's good to be with you. And we would do that a few times through with tapping different parts of our body. And I kid you not, Jake, that's been 7 years since I've done that on a consistent basis with students. And I'm fortunate enough to see some of those students who are now in high school, and they'll see me and they'll be like, hey, Coach Hunter. And they'll start tapping their shoulders and be like, hello, how do you do? It's good to be with you. So not only did they, follow along with the routine, but they realized like this is a way that we greet people, that we start a period of time on a positive setting, and by making people feel welcome and having a little bit of fun at the same time. So that was just like the entry routine. But anyone who's worked with students with mild to significant disabilities knows that if you can just get the group in, settled, and started, you are more than halfway to your goals.
Definitely. And remind me, what grade level is that we use the
So
routine?
that self-contained group had from kindergarten to 5th grade, all in the
Okay.
same group with a
Okay.
handful of aides. Could be anywhere from 2 to 4 aides that would come, and usually it was anywhere from 10 to 15 students.
Wow. So let's dive into adaptive physical education
Sure.
for our listeners who may not know about it or much about it. What exactly do you teach? Tell us a little bit more about APE.
Sure. So, adaptive physical education is specialized instruction designed to meet the unique needs of students with disabilities. The whole point is to ensure that they have equal access to meaningful and developmentally appropriate physical education. Now, these students with disabilities, they're still working towards the same standards, the same grade level outcomes, the same progressions or indicators that the general education students work towards. So it's really all about it's an art. It's about how do I bridge these significant gaps? And typically in our state, that's Maryland, we think of APE students being 2 or more years behind their grade level peers when assessed and having informal observations and interviews and things of that nature. So there's a gap that exists. And so how do we bridge that gap between when the student is and where the school or district or state requirements are for their age or grade level?
Hmm.
So it's a lot, but the thing about it is it really hyper focuses you as a professional on what is the standard or grade level outcome really asking of the students. So, for example, we might do a lesson involving striking a ball.
Hmm.
And some of us might immediately think of, oh, we could do softball, or we could do wiffle ball, or we could do baseball, or what have you. And those are all very legitimate things to do. However, the standard is just student will strike a ball with a long-handled implement off a tee or tossed by a teacher, sending it forward while demonstrating some of the critical elements. That's an example of one that we have here in Maryland. Then that's all that we are to require of the student. Notice it doesn't say anything about what type of ball it has to be. It doesn't say anything about what size the ball has to be. It doesn't say what the implement has to be or anything about the size, weight, or texture of that. It doesn't say that what the tee has to be. So could the tee be a tabletop for students who need a high level of support, or a traditional tee that we think of in T-ball, or somewhere in between? Absolutely. There's no requirement for how far that ball has to travel or which of the critical elements have to be demonstrated. So I think when you start opening yourself up to what am I actually being asked to teach the student? Not what may be implied from our PE experience or from what we've seen in other gen ed programs, but what is the standard or grade level outcome really asking me to help this student learn and help their skill set grow through? That can be a huge unlock. And from there, it's the problem solving piece. And frankly, that's the best part of the job. It's the problem solving, getting to be creative.
I was just about to say that this leaves a lot of room for creativity for the teacher to kind of come up with different ideas to help make the student succeed. So that's really great. And later on in the interview, we're going to talk about some of those creative elements that you bring.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Brad, take me through a typical day for you.
So let's be clear, as a teacher, there is no typical day. And then as an itinerant adapted PE teacher, that means I go school to school. I have a caseload. It's usually about 20 schools each year. Some of those schools I might have 7 to 10 students at, and some schools I might not have any students at that year. It all just depends on the students that attend that school. A typical day, I would say, with air quotes, you're starting the day with your morning computer work. Of course, it's after my morning workout. I'm a big believer in that. If I don't do my morning workout, I'm stuck in like second gear all day. And I've had pairs and students be like, "What's going on, Brad?" And so definitely got to get that workout in first thing. But then it's 30 minutes plus of emails and follow-ups from yesterday's work before I even like hit my work time, if you will. Generally in the morning, I see 2 to 3 students. That's usually one-to-one. That could be anything from 20 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on the student's IEP. Usually that will also be time there for me to consult with the PE teacher. It could be for one of those 2 to 3 students that I've seen. It could be for another student who may only have those consult or indirect services, but basically checking up on how the student's doing and what I can do to support that PE teacher so the student is learning and growing at the highest level possible when they come to PE. After that, there's no shortage of paperwork and note-taking that's required in adapted physical education. Afternoon is generally pretty similar to the morning with another 2 to 3 students, generally one-to-one, consulting with another PE teacher. And then it's, again, no shortage of notes, paperwork, emails, and things of that nature till the end of the day. And then for myself, typically the evening is an hour to 2 hours working on projects. And that could be anything from school day related projects, like making a new tracking sheet for a student or, making a more attractive target for a student. It could be something like for my state organization, Shape Maryland, helping to recruit presenters or doing some research on an initiative we're doing, or planning the next MAPEC board meeting. So there's always more to do. I love all the things. It can definitely be a lot. I'm currently trying to find my rhythm as we're getting back into it. But there's no shortage of need. And I do find that the more you are willing to put yourself out there of, being willing to help people or provide resources, the more that is often asked of you. So I would encourage folks, when you do find yourself in that position, it is okay to say either no or no, not right now. So just because you may be in a support role or an APE role does not mean you don't have control over your time. And it is perfectly respectful to say, I will help you with that. Let's put a reasonable time frame on that. I will admit I'm very big on I will get that done, ASAP, but that's my own idiosyncrasies.
Right, but it sounds like you're alluding to it's good to have a balance too, right? You got to take care of
Absolutely.
yourself, because there is a lot with the meetings and the emails and the follow up. I did have a follow up question for you. What are some of you mentioned consult? Is that something where the teacher comes to you, or you go observe the teacher and the students? How does that work? This communication.
Right. That's one of the first questions that I get from PE teachers as well, because they're like, hey, I have a student with APE consult. So
Hmm.
I actually started a few years ago giving all of my PE teachers at the beginning of the school year a half pager that describes what consult is in our district. And I always say is I write consult so students have a chunk of time. So it could be, 6 hours annually. And I say, we're going to use that chunk of time with me and you to best support the student. And list some bullet points on there, but it could be something of, let's sit down and let's plan a lesson to increase your comfort in working with the student, or let's sit down and go through the student's IEP. So those are more of like one-to-one teacher and me working. It could be something of the teacher knows what they have coming up. I have a lacrosse unit coming up. We know this student has had difficulty in the past with grasping long-handled implements. Can you provide a piece of equipment? So it may be me going and building a piece of equipment, or picking up a piece of equipment from another location. It could also be, hey, Brad, can you come and support me? I have this unit coming up where everyone's going to be throwing a ball at the same time towards targets, and I'm just a little bit concerned about safety. Could you support me with that student in the actual class for a period of time? So I try to offer a menu, and that menu to be flexible as well. So if you're doing a unit and the student is crushing it, there's no need for me to come in at that piece. But again, if you have a unit later on that you have more safety concerns or more implementation concerns, like, we can dial up the amount of support that I use based on the allotment of time that we've supplied via their IEP.
Thank you for explaining that. It definitely makes sense. So, Brad, what are some examples of successful experiences you had adapting activities for students? I'm sure
Well,
there's a
how
lot.
much time do we have? I feel like this is the meat, right? We could just go and go. So, some of my recent favorites that I've done, we had a grade level outcome for fifth grade about being able to balance on a variety of apparatus with extensions. And, we typically think of a balance beam or some sort of narrow and high object, which for this student, this was just well outside of his comfort zone. He was adamant that anytime he didn't have both feet on the ground, he was very uncomfortable. So we started at the first level of using a lunch table. We happened to be in a space where there were those folding cafeteria lunch tables. And, the table part of it has got to be, 6 feet by at least 2.5 feet. So a solid, large area. And we turned it into, we are going to lunch table surf was the activity. And so, I held his hand and we stood on it together, and we had some, surf music playing on my phone, and we were on top. And before you knew it, he was comfortable with letting go of my hand. And by the end of that lesson alone, he was comfortable standing up on top of the table on his own without me. And then we were working through progressions in a fun and engaging way, doing different poses, if you will, as we surfed on top of the table. So, but again, using a lunch table is not in any, handbook or guide, but that is an apparatus you could balance on. And from there, we moved to the bench. From there, we moved to river stones or balance stones. So we were able to increase the difficulty after we found a place of access for the student that was at their level.
Perfect, perfect. And so that's one example for balancing. Do you have any other examples for maybe striking or foot
Sure.
dribbling?
Yeah, I have a student. So this one I support inside Gen Ed, and the student, it's one of those classic less than ideal arrangements. Two elementary students classes in the gymnasium at the same time. One standard size elementary gymnasium split in half, so it's just noise and balls going over I'll call it a barrier. It's not even a wall. It's a 5 foot. So there's a lot of, exterior noise and distractions. And so I'm there supporting the student, and they were working on badminton, and they've got, regulation nets and regulation rackets. And it was all a bit much for my student to physically engage with. So I always bring a bucket of supplies with me everywhere I go, because you never know exactly what the adaptation is that a student's going to need. I might have an idea of the 2 or 3 things, but I find having at the ready a large contingent of supplies helps me in the moment to say, look, plan A, plan B didn't work. Let's move to plan C. So for this student, we grabbed a couple of tall cones, like 3-foot tall cones, ran some painter's tape in between them to create our low net. The student was sitting in their wheelchair facing the stage. Oh, yes, this area was also interesting because there was a stage in the gymnasium as well. And I was sitting on the steps at the same height as the student, and we were using foam paddles or Nerf paddles or lollipops, whatever you might call them. And we were rallying back and forth. And I kid you not, throughout that semester, there had not been a day when I didn't feel like I had to ask 11 students before I got one student that would engage with the student I was there to support with, whether it was partner work or small-sided games. And when we started doing this, we had a line of students that were forming on the step next to me, calling next, which is, I got next game, that sort of thing. So we ended up moving the game to 2-on-2, and then it was a 3-on-3, and they were making like triangle formations. So it took on a life of its own, where I
Interesting.
eventually was just stepping back and just helping to make sure the most basic of rules were followed. So that was really a glorious moment to see students recognize that this version of the activity is a high level of fun. We're still working on the same skills, and we can have that fun and work on those skills with the student that has some physical limitations, when perhaps in the past we might have just overlooked that student. So that was a win all around.
That's really cool that they were able to see that and then kind of want to participate, where they felt comfortable. So but had that not been set up, this might not have happened, right? If
Right.
this opportunity wasn't available. So that's
And
great.
I could have very easily just waited with my student until it was their turn at the full size nets and try, but there I go back to again, what was the grade level outcome for there? There's no mention of the height of the net or anything of that nature. So, like, let's bring it to a level where the student can engage in the skill as independently as possible on their own. Let me be clear, even though the student had diminished physical capacity and was in a wheelchair, was independently holding the lollipop racket, was independently striking the balloon over the low net. As I said, I was just a facilitator at that point. So,
That's great. So these are a couple of great examples. One about the striking, one about the balancing. Do you have any maybe for a dance?
oh, absolutely. So let me be clear, dance is a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but I'm always there because I think it's appropriate to represent of even if this skill is not my strength, that's okay. I can acknowledge that with my students and they can see me learn as well. So with dance, I had a student that I kept trying to introduce dance to this third grade student, um as a warm up, and no traction, as a instant activity we did like in between two larger activities, no traction with that. I would start dancing, see if the student would be enticed, no. So I tried some things and I couldn't get anywhere. And so then one lesson for the mini lesson part of the lesson, I started asking the student if they knew any dance moves, and he started demonstrating a few, like the dab, or other ones that I don't know the name to, but we started making up names for them, like, oh, like that's the peace sign jangle, if you're going back and forth. And I had these little mini, again, in my kit that I keep ready, little mini laminated cards, like half the size of an index card. And I started writing down with a dry erase marker the names and drawing just a little stick figure picture of it. So pretty short order, we had a small deck. It might have been 8 to 9 different cards.
Mm.
And then I asked the student what song we could do these to. And so the student chose a song, that's fine. And then we took the cards and I let the student decide which one we would do first, what order we would do them in, how many times we would do that, so how many beats or counts we would do it. And after just like 2 times going through, the student took charge of it and was like rearranging the order. He was like, no, I want to do the hip shuffle, and then I want to do the head bob, and then I want to do the like raise the roof, and then he would resequence them. And it was just such a beautiful moment to see that he needed for it to be something tangible that he could see the process instead of just trying to follow along to a, a an audio song or try to follow along with the teacher. And it was a control piece as well. And so
Mhm.
one of the key pieces I think was that he was the leader and I was doing it with him. It wasn't that I was arranging the cards and then he did them. He arranged the cards and then we did them. And by the end of that unit, which is probably 4 weeks, seeing him once a week, we were doing 8 dance moves in succession and then repeating for the length of the song, going through this routine like 3 whole times. Like I was so impressed with his growth. And again, it's part of the art of, I would say, all teaching, but especially adapted PE, of like, how can I make this skill accessible, engaging, and fun for this student?
What a great story. I love it. Choice and voice. And he had plenty of choice.
Yeah, it does, right? And if he decided he was like, nope, I don't like that one anymore, we would just put the card off to the side, and I would never bring it up and would never go back to it. If he decided he was done with it, that's totally fine. Now we did have some dance moves that we did 3 or 4 times in the routine as well, but you know what? That's okay.
No, that definitely. You gotta have fun with it though. So, Brad, what advice would you give to someone considering a career in adapted physical education?
Right. So again, I would say this applies to, definitely all PE teachers, even maybe all teachers, but, you know, uh, double clicking on adaptive PE teachers, you got to have patience. The students that you're going to be working with, you're overwhelmingly going to be working with because, you know, they're not able to do the skills at the pace of their general ed peers. And so you have to have patience and understand that when they don't experience success, that's not a reflection on the student or yourself. It just means we haven't yet found the solution for this student to access this skill or activity. That goes right into the second trait that I think is essential, and that's creativity. If you hear basketball and immediately think regulation size basketball, regulation height and size hoop, 5-on-5, go, that's going to be extraordinarily difficult for adaptive PE students to successfully engage in. But if when you hear basketball, you immediately start thinking, oh, I could use, a trash can as the hoop, and I put it on the floor, or I could use a balloon as the ball, or I could use a beach ball, or, I could adapt this rule so that we no longer are worried about dribbling. We are only focusing on passing, or whatever the case may be. That creativity is going to provide opportunities for success. And the last one is resilience. It can be challenging working with students with significant additional needs, and encountering failure can be a little bit taxing on both you and the students. So I would encourage folks who want to go into adaptive PE is to be resilient. Know that just being a positive and caring adult that interacts with that student is such a huge benefit, and the learning will come. It may not come at the rate or pace that you had hoped for, but be patient with the student, be creative in how you're going to get there, and just be resilient.
Love it. So, have you gotten a chance to observe other programs in your line of work, or have other programs come and visited you? And what's the benefit of that?
Right. So not as often as I would like. I felt the same way when I was a PE teacher. It's always an issue about sub coverage or what have you. I
Right.
would say that I network with a lot of adapted PE teachers, but it's sort of like reading the directions for how to assemble your new IKEA furniture versus seeing the finished product. Because when you see the finished product, you're like, awesome, I know where that would go in my room or my house. I know what I would put in it. I got it. Versus you just read the directions, you're like, well, like maybe this would go in the living room. Maybe I'll get back to it. So definitely observing a high quality PE program is a huge benefit if you can do it. And I encourage folks that if that we do a give and take. So if folks want to come to my program or to my district, I always ask that they will reciprocate as well, so then that partnership can continue and that we can grow from each other's experiences and learning. So, in my personal experience, not nearly as often I was like. We are fortunate to have 5 of us that do itinerant adaptive PE teaching in Baltimore City schools. And so each of those teachers, at least every other year, I do, if not in person or virtually, watch them do a lesson just to help me grow my own practice. And as I mentioned before, I always reciprocate, and it's not limited to like a 1-for-1 exchange, but anytime that they would like to come and watch something that I do, I'm open to it. And in fact, just today we had a team meeting, and one of the itinerants was asking, hey, Brad, next time you have an indirect consultation with a PE teacher, could I tag along and just kind of see like how you flow through it and how that conversation works? Because that's an area that she had identified of growth for her. So, it may not be in the same time period, but I think once you start opening up those avenues for observations and exchanges, it can be really helpful.
Definitely. So that brings me to my next question, actually.
Yeah.
You collaborate with a lot of different folks, therapists, special education teachers, parents. Who am I missing in there? And how does that work, this communication piece? And why is it so important?
Right. So for me, like the biggest piece of that puzzle of communication is with the parent or guardian. And I am adamant about sharing with the family after every time I work with a student something that we did at a minimum. Usually it's a picture. We were working on X skill. Student was able to do A and B. C is still a challenge. I always try to ask a question as well because the parent or guardian works with that student every day. I see them for
Mhm.
maybe a few minutes a week. So I'll ask a question of, for example, student was very nervous when a ball was moving in their direction at medium to fast pace. Have you noticed that at home, or are there times and circumstances when the student is comfortable with the ball moving quickly in their direction? And parents love to talk about their own children. And so it provides an opportunity of reassuring them that as their parent, you are an expert on your child. Maybe you're not an expert yet on their specific disability or on adapted PE, but you have a lot of expertise and I want to tap into it. And that just makes it so much easier on the rare occasion that there is a legitimate concern or an issue to say, hey, we've hit a speed bump, and I need some support here, because they know that you are consistently working with their student and consistently have their best interest in mind and consistently trying to improve your own practice. So I found that to be by far the most valuable piece of communication.
And that's great
Of course,
advice too, to be able to ask the parent, because obviously they know their child, the best, and not just,
100%.
give information, but also receive information from them. It's a
Yeah,
two-way
that
street.
was one of those things that I had to learn after when I kept getting responses my first year or two. There were things like, "Okay, coach," or like just the thumbs up emoji. I realized I wasn't engaging parents on the level that I wanted to, and if
Mhm.
I'm just, you know, giving them a paragraph of what we did, I'm really not giving them an opportunity to respond. So that was one of the reasons why I started implementing that. Let me ask a question, and that's really helped a lot. And of course, I also check in with the PE teacher, even if it's not part of the IEP. I still want to know their thoughts and their notices. I'm really fortunate that I share an office, like where I have a desk, which I'm rarely at, but when I am, and there's a PT and an OT professional in that office and a speech pathologist next door. So I'm really fortunate that there's experts uh, in those fields that often have overlap to adapt to P that I can tag in for their expertise.
That's great. You can pick their brain too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes we all get stuck. You've tried, 18 different things and you're just not sure, is it the way you're presenting it? Is it the student? Is it, not the right time, place, and space? So those types of things. But yeah, and outside of that, I think it's really important to collaborate with your team, whether that's PE teachers, other adaptive PE teachers in your school, your zone, your district. And I would encourage everyone to build their team. So they have folks that they can ask when they need assistance. So I mean, I've been really fortunate through like social media to have networked with folks, and I feel like I have an expert for everything that I need. When I need to know how to make a really eye-popping visual, like I have someone I can connect to for that. When I need assistance with, I've got a unified PE program is trying to get off the ground, and that's not an area of expertise for me. How can I better support them? I've got someone I can ask for that. When I need to craft a piece of equipment that is switch operated, again, not one of my core competencies, but I've got someone I can ask for that. And all of these folks are from outside of my district. And I will say that if you're nervous about reaching out, or if you're not sure how people would respond, I have yet to encounter anyone in adapted PE who was not more than forthcoming and supportive and helpful when you ask.
You just got to ask, right?
Right? I mean, they always over deliver. And I'm just so impressed with people in the field.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I can definitely see, in our district, we have our APE teachers as well, and they're collaborating with everybody and they do a great job as well. So let's talk a little bit about PD in regards to APE. What role do you see professional development playing in maintaining high standards?
Right. So whether it's professional development or professional learning or webinars, it's just a must have for teacher growth. I think, the most basic way to work on it is, if we think now, a teacher could be nearing retirement if they had started back in 1995. And just consider how much we have learned about how students and their brains acquire information, how much we've learned about how movement is essential to learning and health, how much physical education curriculum has evolved over those times, how much we've learned about disabilities and how to connect and reach students. So to think of someone still teaching the exact same way they did in 1995 and 2025 is appalling. And so that's why we need professional development and professional learning, et cetera. And it really just helps to impart that growth mindset as a teacher. I don't know how you can be successful without having a growth mindset, because you've always got a new crop of students coming in that have a different background or different life experiences, and you've got to be adapting the way that you present, share, and expect students to perform. Even in my own case, I'm honored to be the 2025 National Adaptive PE Teacher of the Year. And, that's such a high honor that I never dreamed of reaching. And I find myself, for example, when I meet with the district teachers of the year, Steve from Minnesota and Matt from Virginia, experts in APE, and I'm always learning something from them every time we sit down. And, here I am, the National APE Teacher of the Year. So it's one of those things of, there's so much out there that we can do with APE students, that we can learn to help our students, that I think it's important to have a little bit of humility and recognize that there's always more that we can do or implement or even experiment and try with. And perhaps it won't work for you. It won't work for your program the first 10, 12, even 20 times you do it. And that's all right as well. I don't see how we can encourage our students to work through failure if we're not willing to do it as well ourselves. So I'm a big believer in professional development. I think that it's an essential part of being a high quality professional.
Well said, Brad. And I love how I haven't heard the example you put about the teacher that came in 1995 and then 2025, and how they should not be teaching the same way. But this PD and having this growth mindset and being humble and learning from other people, that's so important, in order to help not only ourselves grow, but also the students. So like you mentioned, they're coming to us different years, different perspectives, different backgrounds. And so they really need our best selves. So PD is something that can help lead us to that. So
Right. Yeah.
really great. So what are your thoughts on the future of AP in promoting even greater inclusivity within school communities?
Yeah. So, it can be really easy for students with adapted PE who often have significant disabilities to be marginalized, not just in PE, but throughout the school day. And there are a lot of efforts to try to remedy that. One of them is Unified PE, and that's a program where outside of your required PE class, it's an opportunity for students to come to the gym and work at a pace that's appropriate for the adapted PE students with a 1-to-1 ratio of gen ed peers. So it's as much about those social skills as it is about acquiring manipulative skills, for example. And while I don't have a tremendous amount of experience with that in my district, I'm so heartened when I hear stories from other districts or even students that have presented on the topic, sharing that making a connection in a unified PE program is incredibly powerful when you see it carry over to the lunchroom. And now that student is sitting with gen ed students more often, or when they're in the hallway and someone gives them a fist bump when they go by. And it's those little wins that happen throughout the day that, if you keep stacking, can really help with a culture of change. I will say, as a educational field, we have a long way to go. I have encountered programs who with the best of intentions. They think they're doing unified PE when they take a self-contained class of students and drop them in to a 30 kid gen ed class and are shocked to realize that that's not a best practice. And again, doing it with the best of intentions, no, thinking that they're doing something like unified PE. So I think APE can really support in, advocating, these students are part of your school community as well. These students are to have all of the same opportunities as everyone else in the school community, and that these students should be engaging with their gen ed peers to the maximum extent possible throughout the day. It's so easy to have an us and them mentality when you have this bubble of self-contained students that, they go to a resource by themselves. They go to lunch maybe by themselves or at their own table. They're in a separate classroom. It just becomes so easy to be like, that's the other group, as opposed to that's part of our community. So I just keep coming back to this AP. The best thing I think I can do is just to advocate that these students are here. They're part of your school community, and I'm a resource. And while I don't know a lot about everything, I know a good deal about some things, especially when it comes to physical activity, and to let leaders in the school know, like, I'm here to help with those types of things as well.
Well said. So what you mentioned, the unified P and people have the good intentions. What's something that those students or those teachers or that staff would need to make it, even with the good intentions, to make it, I don't want to say acceptable, but to make it appropriate, So somebody you have a lot of people with good intentions, but they might not know the steps or the appropriate
Sure.
method to go forward. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I like the easiest way or the best way that I found to explain it is um, what unified PE should be is that we have students with adapted PE requirements,
Mhm.
and they are in a PE environment that moves at their pace. They dictate the pace of the class. With gen ed students there doing the activities with them, supporting them in their work, helping perhaps in leadership roles as well. But the students with additional needs are setting the tone and the pace.
Got it.
Whereas what often happens is students are placed into gen ed PE with that have additional needs. They're outnumbered, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 5, because there's already 30 other students in there,
Mhm.
and they're expected to keep up with the gen ed curriculum, which if they could do, and this isn't all students, but if that was something that was easily attainable, they would be with the gen ed class on a more excuse me, on a more consistent basis.
Got it. So it's really about having the students with the needs dictate and set the pace, not the other way around. They're not following the pace of the other students. It's a
Exactly.
got it. Got it. Thank you for explaining that. So Brad, we're coming to a close of the interview and it's been great, but what do you hope to see in the future? What goals do you have? These can either be personal or professional.
Mhm. Wow. I'll try to keep this narrow, but I really want to see a more inclusive culture of physical activity. And when I say that, I'm not just speaking about schools, but I'm talking about our communities too, where I think it's important that we acknowledge that there is a sports industrial complex, and that is not benefiting the vast majority of youth with and without disabilities. And we need to find a way to normalize informal physical activity in which adapting the rules or the equipment easily flows through that equipment, through that activity, so that participants don't ever feel like they're causing an issue or can't be part of it. I'll give you a great example. I believe it was this past year at Mother's Day. There was myself, my 13-year-old daughter, my brother, and my 9-year-old nephew were in the front yard. And I always have equipment in my trunk. And my daughter had asked me to get out one of these, like, uh, mesh coated trainer volleyballs, I'll call it, a little bit lighter than trainer volleyball. But we had no net. We have a tree in the middle of the yard, and we start hitting the ball back and forth. And then we're talking about, well, you can let it bounce, like that's fine. And then it's, well, you can let it bounce as many times as you need to send it back over to the other team. And then it's, well, you can use any part of your body to send it back over to the other team. And we just kept adding more rules, not to constrict the activity, but to open up the activity. So the fun and engagement was at a maximum level. Oh, like if it bounces off a tree, that's still in bounds, like you decide if the brick was in or out, that's, framing out the flower bed. And Jake, I kid you not, I thought we were going to do like 10 minutes. It was a warm day and everyone was going to go inside. 2 hours later, my sister is wondering where her son has been when he's a hot, sweaty mess up there. And he's like, "Ma, like it's going great," And we had made up little like names for our teams and little chants and cheers. And if you had asked me what the score was, or who was winning, or who was doing the best, I had like no idea. It was literally one of those examples where we were having maximum fun. And we were being physically active in an activity that anyone could have joined. Like, for example, if like my mom had stepped outside, she would have just like been inserted right into the game without missing a beat.
That's awesome. What a great story. So Brad, how can our listeners connect with you? Social media, email? What's the best way
Yeah,
if they have
so
questions?
all of those things, right? So email is bbhunter@bcps.k12.md.us, and maybe we can post that in the show notes because I know it's hard to pick up verbally. I'm also on X and Blue Sky. You can find me at @bhunter in B More. And I'm pretty active there. I try to post at least something every day from what I'm doing or what I'm thinking. I'm really good about answering emails. So if you reach out to me, I promise I'll get back to you within the week. And then a lot of resources that I help to collect and post are on the MAPEC website. If you just Google MAPEC, MAPEC website, you'll find it. If you want to receive the MAPEC resources or notifications of what we have going on, there's a link there that you can join. It's free. You do not have to be a Maryland teacher. You don't even have to be a teacher to join. The whole point of that organization is to provide support and resources to folks that need additional support for students with additional needs.
And so for the folks that are listening, these are all great resources. I was on the MAPEC website, and that's how I actually met you, Brad, through the MAPEC website. I went on a couple webinars, and you do an awesome job with the seminars. You have great folks come on. So really, I really encourage our listeners to reach out and check those resources out. So Brad, thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise with us.
Oh, this has been tremendous, Jake. I know that we could go on for quite a lot longer talking PE and adaptive PE, but I appreciate this time and everybody who took the time to listen.
Thank you. Thank you. So listeners, if you have any questions, you can always email us at mayfordpodcast@gmail.com. We'll have this episode uploaded soon. Also, we're asking our listeners to rate and share the podcast if it has helped you in any way, as I'm sure it has. Thank you all for listening. Have a great week, and we will be back soon.